Hello, everyone. I'd like to introduce Fabricio Balcazar, who will be presenting entrepreneurship experiences of youth with disabilities. You can start. Are you right to begin, Fabricio?
Okay.
Yeah.
Welcome. Thank you for joining. Hopefully, we will have an interesting conversation. I am Fabricio Balcazar. I am a professor at the University of Illinois at Chicago and a past president of FCRA. I used to be in the leadership for some time. So I'm very glad that you are joining. We are going to be talking about entrepreneurship, which is a topic that I became very interested because of issues of economic justice. After seeing, especially over many years, how many people with disabilities that I was working with were unemployed and couldn't work. They could not find jobs, which is a major problem that they were facing. So this is one of the main reasons why I became very interested in this topic, trying to figure out ways to enhance the opportunities for people with disabilities to get access to employment. This project is part of a grant that has been funded by the U.S. Department of Education and the National Institute of Independent Living and Rehabilitation Research, and it's called Entrepreneurship for Youth with Disabilities. Let me start by pointing out that we are living, as you know, through a very serious crisis. It's not only the pandemic, which we know that has been hell for everybody in everywhere in the world, but also because over the last 10, 15, 20 years, many companies, especially here in the United States, are taking advantage of the technology and robotics, computers, and so forth, and eliminating many jobs that people used to have. And also outsourcing, which is a common practice here in the United States. I don't know, I imagine it's the same in Australia, but at least here, they send these jobs to low-income countries like Mexico, for instance, and other countries. So the jobs go away and it becomes more difficult for people to be able to find jobs. And it becomes more difficult for everybody. There are also some very poor policies of economic development. And those policies tend to diminish the economic opportunities and generate a global underclass of unemployed individuals across the world, and especially here in America. And what are some of those policies? I will mention that in a moment. With regards to the context of people with disabilities, the unemployment right now is almost 20% for people who are 18 to 64. And the ones that are actually working earn about 2/3 of the salary of a regular employee without disabilities. And they are unfortunately less likely to receive benefits because unfortunately, I don't know if you know about the United States, but we don't have a very good healthcare system, and many people who are working don't even get, healthcare benefits, especially if they are in low pay and minimal job situations. So it is a very difficult situation for a lot of people. This is what I was talking about, the policy. In America, there is this tension about what is right and what is wrong. Unfortunately, for the politicians and people in the government, it's right to subsidize large corporations and farmers. For instance, this administration has been spending billions of dollars over the last few years in farms because of the tensions with the Chinese. There were a lot of cuts and they have been subsidizing. And unfortunately, we are not talking about the small farmers. We are talking about very large corporations that have very large farms who are the ones that are really benefiting. So it's nice to help the rich, but if you try to help the poor and provide some fair programs for them, oh, that's socialism, that's communism, that's horrible. You cannot do that. I don't know if you have experienced something similar where you are, but this is part of the tragedy of the history of the kinds of policies that we have. Any comments about this from anybody? I want to make it a conversation, so feel free to talk if you want to share anything. Here is another problem that we experience. Oh, anyway, that one was lost. Okay. The purpose of the project is to evaluate an intervention to help youth with disabilities start small businesses. And it becomes a real opportunity for young people to explore their skills, their abilities, their interests, and their motivation for entrepreneurship and self-employment. We use a participatory research approach in order to maximize the relevance of the findings and the use of the intervention that we are trying to design, because our goal is to disseminate our intervention for other high schools to use whenever they are interested. So these are the phases of the project. We are just finishing the first year, and we conducted a number of interviews with youth and young adults with disabilities, and I'm going to be sharing with you the findings of this qualitative study. And we are now starting the formative evaluation. We are going to have a piloting of the curriculum that we are developing with 2 high schools in the city here in Chicago, primarily low-income kids with disabilities, minority kids, African Americans and Latinos. And we are going to run this project for the next couple of years to test it, to see how the students react and how successful they are in implementing any kind of a small business. And after that, then during the next following 2 years, we are going to have a randomized controlled trial where we are going to see the impact of the intervention and compare the outcomes, the transition outcomes, which is the employment outcomes for the kids that participate and those who are in similar contexts to them, but did not receive the training. The target population for the first year study were juniors and seniors with disabilities from low-income minority communities, as I mentioned. And we interviewed 20 kids, 6 service providers, and 5 school administrators. And I'm going to share the results of the interviews with all these people. And as I mentioned, we have a couple of high schools that are already engaged in the process for the next phase. We are starting that in January of next year. With regards to the main findings of the qualitative study, these are some of the main facilitators to self-employment that they reported. First, access to other entrepreneurs, especially the school administrators and the service providers. They were very strong in emphasizing that it's important for the kids to see role models, that they will benefit strongly from having an opportunity to see other entrepreneurs and to learn from them and to get, some advice from them. However, only 20% of the kids indicated that, but we agree that this is something very important, and we plan in our intervention to add this component so they have access to these mentors. Having social support from family and friends was very important from the perspective of the entrepreneurs and everybody, basically. The case is that some families don't encourage the kids to try to pursue these ideas. And there could be several reasons that they might be okay. And one is that the kids often don't have money to try to open a small business, which is a common problem, especially for people who are low income. However, the point that they are missing sometimes, the family and friends, is that some businesses could be started with no money, or very little money. And we are going to be talking about it later when I discuss some of the elements that we are proposing for our intervention. So this is important. They need social support from the people around them. Motivation. The kids indicated that the idea of being your own boss was very important for them. And they were very happy that they could be their own boss. And almost everybody agreed. Many of them also indicate that they would love to be able to help others. And 55% of the entrepreneurs indicated that. And obviously earn money, they also want to be able to earn some money in this experience. The other element that is a facilitator is access to funding. And they agree very strongly that, yes, indeed, people need to have access to funding. Are there any questions or comments about these facilitators so far? Anybody? No? Okay. In terms of other facilitators, the personal qualities, and they identify the following. Being persistent. Being persistent was recognized by the entrepreneurs as very strong, and also by the service providers. Being creative, and this point comes in terms of the idea of coming up with the business idea and how they need to be creative to come up with a good idea. And it was very strong for the entrepreneurs and the service providers. Having charisma, and I think that several of them identified that this charisma was important for them, and having hope, especially for the entrepreneurs, this was something that they thought was also important. The other facilitator was to have opportunities to market and to sell the products or services. One of the things that many of them have experienced are trade shows, and they are connected with a business incubator that facilitates these trade shows access. So that's one of the reasons why they mentioned this. Of course, they use word of mouth, which is something that mostly everybody uses. And they are starting to learn about using social media and using websites, although they recognize that they need to learn more about how to use the websites in a more effective way. Because of this, we are thinking that once we introduce the class next year, we are hoping to have some support from people who can talk to them about using social media and the websites in order to enhance their market capabilities. The other point that they mentioned has to deal with flexibility and openness to adapt the business. And this is interesting because they all agree that they need to be flexible in the way they work out the process. They cannot be fixed. They have to be flexible. They have to be willing to change. They have to learn from their experiences, and they have to make modifications and adaptations as necessary. So that was another element that they agree it was important. And finally, mentoring from an adult. And they feel that this adult could be another entrepreneur, or it could be somebody who has experience with businesses, or could be somebody from their family that is willing to support them. As a matter of fact, I became very intrigued by this idea many years ago, maybe 10 years ago, because I hear from a parent that told me that she had supported her son's uh, opportunity to start a small business recycling oil funds. And yeah, we all have oil funds that we don't use, and what is interesting is that they find out that some of those funds could be sent and shipped overseas, and in other countries they fix them, they resell it, and there is a whole market for used funds. And I didn't know that at the time, but when I traveled to Colombia, my home country, I realized, oh, look at these funds. Yeah, they are all funds that people are no longer using over there, but here they are, and they are selling these funds. And it was interesting that this mother, what she did was to support her son's idea and nurture him. And, by the time I was talking to them, she has her son had already one employee working, and they have created several locations across the community in the north side here in Chicago, in the suburbs, where people knew about where these places where they could drop their old electronic elements. They were also starting to collect some old computers too. So this is something that I realized, wow, sometimes with just a supported adult, a kid can develop a good business. With regards to the barriers, there were a number of barriers that were identified. And of course, the most important one was financial support. All of the administrators and the school administrators and the service providers recognized that there was a main barrier for them. But it was interesting that only one of the entrepreneurs thought that this was a problem, nobody else. So there is a discrepancy between the professionals on one side worry about this part, but the kids are not. The kids are not so worried. And one reason that could be is that a lot of these kids knew that my project was going to offer them funds. So maybe that was why they were not so worried about that part, because they knew that eventually if they were going to engage in my project, there were going to be some funding. And I will explain that in a moment. But it's interesting the discrepancy between the professionals and the young entrepreneurs. Now, lack of confidence. And I think this is a problem for almost everybody. It's hard for anybody to start a business. And in order to do that, you need to have a lot of confidence. And unfortunately, most people with disabilities don't have enough. Because one of the things that is common in the experience of people with disabilities, which is very sad, is that a lot of people emphasize their limitations, not their strengths. And it's often a systemic issue. It is a systemic issue in the schools, where the teachers and everybody and the professionals are paying attention to what is that they cannot do as opposed to what is it that they can do. And that creates a series of very serious consequences, I believe, in terms of their confidence. They are also often demoralized. They are not encouraged or nurtured to try out new things. And this is unfortunate. And sometimes it comes from friends and family, even teachers who, don't like or don't believe that they have the capabilities to do some of these things. I have noticed that often service providers, especially, I don't know if you are familiar with the United States, but here in the United States, we have an agency that is a federal agency called the Department of Vocational Rehabilitation Services. And this is an agency that is supposed to help people with disabilities after high school find them jobs. and find them, support them to get employment and equipment and assistance. They pay you to go to college if you have to, everything. And unfortunately, a lot of those counselors, they are called rehabilitation counselors, don't want to take the effort of spending months preparing somebody to develop a business like this. They would rather have them working in McDonald's, next week. And then they close the case and happy ending and everybody, but unfortunately, those are dead end jobs that pay minimum wage and very little benefit for the people. So that's one of the challenges, that a lot of people don't have confidence in the kids. The lack of social support and especially discouragement from loved ones came out. And especially among the service administrators and the school administrators and the service providers. The entrepreneurs was interesting. They did not share the same thought. And we were very pleased to see that. So from the perspective of the participants, the youth with disabilities, they feel that they have a lot of support from their loved ones. However, the professionals don't think so. So this is an interesting overlap in between the two and how they see the world from a different perspective. The good news is that the kids are very positive about it, not negative. Here they talk about vocational rehabilitation, and this is the agency that I was just talking about. This agency actively discourages entrepreneurs from starting businesses because they feel that it's too much work, unfortunately. So the counselors don't have enough training for helping kids do this. The process is too technical because I have seen the application and it's like 20 or 50, 20, at least 20 to 30 pages, the application just to fill out forms to be qualified to apply for this with the counselor. And there is no guarantee. Actually, I know many counselors who get these forms and they never approve the funding. The other thing is that very often they don't support enough, they don't have enough money to support the entrepreneurs. So all this was shared by the service providers, and these were people who knew about this agency. Actually, one of these people was the associate director of the state agency. So yeah, it's quite a challenge. The other barriers that were identified has to deal with lack of space for some of the businesses, especially was identified by the entrepreneurs. And this has to deal with kids that need a space in their home or a space somewhere else, like an office space to work. The good news is that the business incubator is providing them, or was, because they had to close because of the pandemic, but the business incubator to which most of these kids were connected, they were providing office space. So they had office space, phones, and computer equipment, printers, and so forth. And some of them have private offices where they have a space for their own things to work with. It was interesting that discrimination came out as one of the barriers. And as I mentioned earlier, people with disabilities often experience discrimination, especially by people that are not familiar with their strengths and their capabilities. So they look at the limitations and they don't see their strengths. So this is something that is a systemic problem, and it's just going to take time, for society to change. But it's something that it was mentioned by the service providers. Insufficient sales or revenue. The entrepreneurs recognized that this was a problem, and also the service providers. However, for many of these kids, it's not so much about making a lot of money. That's not their view. They want to have a reason to wake up in the morning and get out of bed, because some of them struggle with that. It's not easy. because some of them have very severe disabilities. So yes, I mean, it's nice to make money, but on the other hand, they cannot make too much money, because if they make too much money, then their health benefits get cut, because the federal government has some rules about how much money you can make in order to qualify for the type of health care that people with disabilities receive. Some of them also mentioned lack of transportation, which is an issue, although we have in the city of Chicago, we are supposed to have an accessible transportation system. For some of the kids that live in the suburbs, it's more difficult because they don't have easy access to the train. And because in the suburbs there are no trains, because basically the train system is primarily in the city of Chicago, so that becomes an issue for them. And they also need more operational support, either employees or volunteers who can help them perform some of the tasks associated with the items or the services that they are trying to provide. So this becomes a little bit overwhelming for some of them. And this was something that many of the entrepreneurs recognized that was a problem. So before moving forward, I want to ask if anybody has any questions or comments about these barriers.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you spoke about the lack of social support, and particularly from loved ones, and the discrepancy between how the professionals, viewed that lack of social support, and then how the actual entrepreneurs didn't see that as a lack of social support from their loved ones. Why do you think that there is that discrepancy between how the professionals kind of saw that and the young people?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I am not sure. I think that many professionals don't engage with the families at all.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't know what's going on with the kids' families. And I don't even know if they ask the kids about what's going on with their families. They tend to be very focused on the kids and what the kid is doing and around the kid. I mean, for instance, the people in the agency, vocational rehabilitation, it happens a lot because in some cultures, like the Latino culture, the person with a disability come with the parents and siblings, it's like 10 people outside. And the VR counselor says, no, only you can come in. And because it's a cultural thing, the whole family wants to be involved, it's like the kid with disability is the most important part for the family, and they want to be part of that. And the counselor said, no, you stay away, I don't want to talk to you. That's a cultural issue right there that I have seen over the years.
Yeah.
But they tend to be disengaged, so that could be part of the problem. But I think there is a perception that many of the kids don't get the support that they need from their loved ones, but the kids disagree with it, which is very nice. I was very pleased to see that there was a disagreement about this.
Yeah, I guess that, as you were saying, that there is a discrepancy with how people see social support. So maybe the families think that they are socially supporting their children, or the young people, but the professionals might not view that as support. Yeah.
Correct.
I think we have another question.
Any more questions?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks, Professor, for highlighting the barriers. I just wanted to inquire, when you have listed these barriers, are they in the order of, from the highest barriers? I know there's 100%, which is showing that lack of money, but like how you have listed them, is that in the order of the main barriers? Because I was looking at the percentage, I couldn't relate very well. So is that in the order of how they were?
So are the barriers listed in a particular order, based on the percentages?
That's correct.
Yes, actually, yes. I think so. For instance, this was the first one was the one that was most represented among all of them, because all of the other ones have some, but this one everybody has almost, especially the professionals have a lot of emphasis on that, and the other ones are a little less. But interesting, in the first one also, there was a strong disagreement between the professionals and the kids. And that was also very interesting. There was a look, the kids, only 5% of them thought that they didn't have the money. But for the professionals, it was almost 100%. So there is a discrepancy, yes. But yeah, the list in a way reflects the degree in which some of these barriers are highlighted by the respondents. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, the one thing that is happening is that the project is moving very well, and we are now working on the training, and we are going to be developing a curriculum that is going to be implemented by teachers in the high schools. And as you probably know, right now all of the schools here in Chicago, the majority in the inner city, are working remotely. So it's going to be online training. We have one school that is going to have about 15 to 20 kids. And this is a school that I am very connected with for former dropout students. And they are all going to be students with disabilities who are going to participate. And in this school, there is going to be one class, and these students are going to sign up for the class. And we are going to train the teacher. A couple of teachers are going to participate. And we have a curriculum, and they are going to be conducting the training on their own. The other thing that is happening is that, and the kids know about this, is that we are going to be offering up to $500 for a startup cost for the youth as they develop a business plan and make a pitch for the funding. So we are going to have a small team of a couple of professionals and business people who are going to be listening to the pitches and looking at the business plans. And if the kids have had a good idea and a reasonable marketing strategy and a reasonable offering of a plan, then we are going to allow them to get the money. They just have to propose a budget up to $500 and they could get the money. We are also allowing them to do this in teams of 2 or 3 kids, depending on the type of business. So it's up to them to decide whether they are going to do as an individual by themselves, or if they are going to be working as a small team with a couple of people. The other thing that I didn't mention, but we are thinking about, is also having a section about social businesses. I don't know if you are familiar with social businesses, but a fellow from, I think it's Afghanistan or Pakistan, somewhere, it's called Janus, has been talking about this concept of social businesses, which is a fascinating idea to allow people to try to start businesses to address social problems and social issues. So we are going to encourage the kids to also look at social issues in their communities and see if they can come up with ideas. Give you an example. There are some senior citizens that need access to buy things because of mobility. They cannot walk easily, or they have some challenges. So some kids could set up a small business just to help these people get whatever their groceries from the supermarket or food from somewhere, etc. So this is one example. Another example could be a couple of girls that decide to start a babysitting program and eventually opening a place for working women to leave their kids, a little house daycare program. So these are the kinds of things that this idea of social businesses could help then also pursue those type of ideas. So once we start the class next year, we are going to be, the kids are going to, towards the end of this academic year, which is somewhere in May, they are going to make their pitches for the money, and whoever gets the money, then we are going to follow them for 6 months to try to learn about their progress, their success, their challenges, and if they need technical assistance and support. We are, of course, going to be supporting those businesses that want to grow and pursue additional funding, and we can refer them to the funding agency to see if they need additional help. Well, that's the vision. So are there any more comments or questions?
I have a couple of questions. Thank you for that interesting presentation. So one question relates to young kids who might have great ideas, but they just need a little bit of more skill development. Say, for instance, they're really into art, they're very artistic, and they're young. But you know that by learning, just to give you an example, digital media is going to take them farther away than stay where they are. Or if they recognize that they have the idea, but they need to polish their skills, whereas art, especially I'm thinking about like the arts, where they just need an extra class and become better. Because these are very young kids. So many of their skills, their ideas might be grandiose and great, but their skills might not be at the level of sustaining a business on their own for years to come. So what are your thoughts about it? And the second question to think about, are you measuring sense of empowerment, sense of efficacy and control?
Yes, we are. But let me go to your first question. Excellent question, by the way. Yes, as a matter of fact, we were very close to closing a site for next year to become one of our partners. Unfortunately, and this was a School for the Arts of Chicago, which is a special school that focus on training kids that have artistic skills in music, in theater, in dancing, almost anything, to develop their skills, artistic skills. And they also get their high school diploma, yes, but what they really get is excellent artistic skills. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, and I had a contact, very close contact with a teacher from that school, and she was thrilled to learn about this because she told me, oh my God, I have several kids that are ready, like now. They would love to be able to have this money to start their business because they are ready. And unfortunately, we discussed this with them, and because of the pandemic, the whole situation for the classroom is like they are engaged with the school like almost 8 hours a day between the practice and the teaching and everything else that they need to do. And most, as you know, everything is long distance now, so it was because of that we couldn't do it. But yes, they told me next year, you know, in 2022 maybe, when things are better, we definitely will love to work with you because we know that these kids, this is something that they will love to do. And they are ready. They are ready. And yes, they are getting the skills, the artistic skills there, but they will love, many of them will love to know more about starting their own business as an artist. So yeah, it's an excellent question. And
we're studying more, yeah.
Yeah, so they are getting the skills, the talent over there, but they are struggling. Now, your second question, Yolanda, was about you lost, yeah. But
are you measuring sense of empowerment?
Yes, we are talking about self-efficacy.
Self-efficacy. Okay, thank you.
Going to empowerment, but we definitely are going to be assessing efficacy. And the reason is that we feel that this is something that could be impacted by this kind of training. The kids are going to, we hope, are going to increase their sense of efficacy after going through this training and after especially trying out the experience of starting a small business. So definitely, yes, we are going to be measuring that. One thing that is fascinating about this is, as I said earlier, is that as community psychologists, we need to start thinking more about economic empowerment for people, because a great deal of all the issues that people are experiencing in terms of marginalization and oppression has to deal with social class and the fact that they are barely surviving, especially in the case of people with disabilities. I don't know about the context of your respective countries, but at least in America, as I said earlier, most of the people with disabilities are poor and they are very marginalized and many are unemployed. And that is something that, you know, these kind of projects are trying to address. Any more comments or questions?
I think there was another question in the comments asking about what kind of businesses the young people were interested in making, and were the collaborative or were the business ideas collaborative?
Yes, there is. I know at least one that is a couple of brothers who have a silk screen printing business. So they have the machines and they are doing t-shirts and hats and cups, you know, with whatever topic. So you have a party to celebrate your grandparents' 50 celebration or something like that, then you can order a mug shot or a t-shirt or something like that. So that's their business. That's the only one that I know is a team effort and they work together. But there are other people. There are a couple of ladies that are doing embroidery and jewelry. There is one guy that is a professional photographer, and he has a studio over there in the building where he has all the equipment and everything. And what he does is weddings and those kinds of things. There was one kid that I love because he was very severe, very severe. He could barely move. And as a matter of fact, in my department, there is a unit, it's an assistive technology unit that developed a pointer for him because he could type moving his head into the screen in the computer because he couldn't move his hands or anything else. And he wrote a book that was published. And it was a wonderful book of stories that is still selling today. You know, not much, but you know, it is for sale and it's been marketed. And unfortunately, the kid died. That was very sad to see because of his health. He was very severely disabled, but he left this legacy of his book. And the book is still in the market, and you know, it's just telling his life story and many of his personal advice and wisdom for people to follow. But yeah, the ideas vary. They are all over the place. And we are looking forward to what the kids are going to come up with, because in the training, it's very open. It's up to you. Whatever you want to try it, as long as it makes sense. And of course, in the process, they're going to be challenging and questions, is this a good idea or not? Why don't you talk to somebody, talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, talk to anybody, that kind of thing.
I think we have another raised hand.
Yeah, sure. I had just a question on the research participants. Other than the youth with disabilities being beneficiaries in this research, are there any other youth with, or what other role other than being beneficiaries are the youth with disabilities playing in this research way?
One thing that we are thinking about is to hire some of them as mentors, peer mentors, especially the ones who have gone through the training in the first year.
Okay.
After the first year, some of those we are going to be hiring them to come and present their ideas and their experiences to the new classes. And that will create kind of a snowball effect that we feel that over the years, we can have many of these kids being able to come and tell their story about both success and failure, because we have to recognize that some of them are going to fail. But it will be nice for the kids to hear, why did you fail? What happened? As well as why did you succeed and how? So yes, we are definitely looking forward to involving some of these kids in the future. Right now, we have some contacts with several people because as part of the interviews, we interview quite a few people, and some of those people are older, or well, mid-20s, and we are going to be tapping them to as guest speakers. And there is one kid that sent me a note very recently telling me that he has 300 entrepreneurs that he's coordinating, and he has an organization. So he's a wonderful leader, and of course, I am going to be tapping him to come and prepare a presentation to the kids.
Okay, no, thank you for that. And earlier on, you mentioned about having a control component of the research. Have you thought about maybe also having a comparison between youth with disabilities and those without disabilities?
Well,
to
that's
see
a
if there
good
are challenges. Yeah.
A good question. What we found is that there are currently some programs that provide resources and this kind of opportunity and training for kids in high school. One of those programs is called the Diamond Program, and it's a national program, very nice, very good. But they don't have people with disabilities. Actually, very few, if any, and I haven't been able to find one that has kids with disabilities. So that's why I focus on this. The other emphasis is that the funding agency requires that we focus exclusively on people with disabilities because that's what the money is for. So yeah, we are not going to include in our training, in our research, students without disabilities. However, once the training is ready, this training is going to be available to any school. You see? So I hope that the school, any school will use it. And that is going to include kids with and without disabilities, of course. Because I do believe, yes, and I agree, that anybody could benefit from this kind of idea. The only problem, and this is something that we are going to have to discuss with the high schools, is the funding for the competitions. And there could be some potential involvement of funding agencies, especially local companies who might want to donate, and foundations, because there are quite a lot of people out there who are looking for these kinds of things to support. And if the school district calls, some corporation and say, hey, would you like to donate $5,000 for awards for kids for participating in entrepreneurship? Woo! They will say, of course. So we see that as a possibility moving forward. Yes, opening this to anybody and everybody.
Okay. No, thank you so much. And just lastly, just to say, I'm not so sure if you'll be able to share your presentation. I'm much more interested in the work you're doing and thinking of replicating such in Malawi, where I am.
Send me an email. Here is my address. And
okay, thank you. All right, thank you.
To send it to you, yes.
Okay.
So where are you?
I'm based in Malawi, in Africa.
Oh wow, wonderful.
Beautiful. We also have a request for the link to the book that you were speaking of, if you could link the book, that would be really great, either in the chat or perhaps after we can add that as a resource to your project session.
Okay. Yeah, because I don't have it right in front of me.
All good, all good. You can send that over to us and we can organize that for you. There's 4 minutes to go. Is there any more questions or discussion points for Fabricio?
Well, thank you very much for your interest and your participation.